Alright guys, today's video I wanted to go over what funds are available in the TSP, and um, the question I think that goes across everyone's mind is, what fund should I invest in? So I'm going to go over what I think on that, and once again, none of this is financial advice. It's just what my opinion is and what I personally have done. So within the TSP, and all this can be found online, um, you can find which fund is which and what each fund represents. So in a nutshell, we got the G fund, which is the safest of all the funds. It's comprised of government securities, and it'll yield the least amount of interest or return. But it's the fund that most retirees will probably be in, so as to keep their retirement funds less risky. The next fund, well, then here's the if you go online, it'll tell you right here, the G fund is calculated by the U.S. Treasury as the weighted average yield of approximately 136 U.S. Treasury securities. So um, that's in a nutshell what the G fund is. Um, the next fund is the F fund, which would be the second most less risky fund. It's called the Fixed Income Index, and it tracks the Bloomberg Barclays Aggregate Index, Bond Index. Um, and there's the yields: 1 year, 3 year, 5 years, and 10 years. Those are just the average yield in those yearly increments. The C fund is a reflection of the S&P 500, um, and it'll tell you here's the top holdings within the C funds. If you're invested in it, you're invested in such companies as Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Facebook, Berkshire Hathaway, JP Morgan, Alphabet, which is a subsidiary of Google, Johnson and Johnson, and Visa. So these are the top 10 holdings in that portfolio. So if you're invested in the C fund, aka the S&P 500, that's what you will be invested in. The S fund is the fund that mimics the Dow Jones Total Stock Market Index, and the top 10 holdings of that are Tesla, Blackstone, Lululemon, Workday, Splunk, Palo Alto, CoStar, Square, Dexcom. So these holdings change over the years, and they change over the years based off um, the companies will come in and out of these holdings based off of their performance as a business. Um, so you'll see this switch. I mean, in the past, Tesla was never part of the S fund because several years ago, Tesla didn't exist and wasn't as successful company-wise in their production. Um, but now that they're doing really good as a company, they're now within the top 10 holdings of the S fund. These holdings also are determined by the people managing your funds. So Blackstone is the company, or sorry, BlackRock is the company that manages the TSP, and they are responsible for putting the companies within each of these funds for us through their analysis of the company's um, uh, successful um, operation of their business. The last fund you have is the I fund, and it tries to mimic the MSCI EAFE stock index. I would just look that up to see what that acronym stands for. Um, the top 10 holdings are Nestle, that's the chocolate company. Some of these I don't even know, but you got Roche, Novartis, Toyota, SAP. So those are the top 10 holdings. This is a fund that is more international. Um, the C fund is comprised of 500 companies, US companies. The S fund is comprised of US companies, but they're also, instead of 500 companies. I believe there's about 2,800 companies that comprise the S fund. We'll go back and see that. At one point in time, it showed that, but I don't see it here now. Anyways, so that's the I fund. So if you don't want to invest in one of these individual funds, before I go on to the next deal, most people, they always ask me, well, what fund should I invest in? That's the question that most people invest in. If I were to go back in the future and redo what I've done, which before I go over what I would do, what I have done in the past is all spelled out on my website, www.tspandme.com. If you go on to my TSP timeline, I blatantly say what I did. So from year 1 through year 6, I was in the AL 2040 funds. These are the target retirement date funds. Year 7, I did the AL 2050 fund. And then from year 8 all the way till I think it was year 10 that I did the S fund. Right now, I am in the AL 2065 fund and the AL income fund. And if I were to go back in the future or the past and redo anything, I think that I would have just stayed in the either the S fund or the C fund. I would have been 100% allocated in one of those. And the reason being is because the target retirement date funds, although they are good, what they do is they are a target retirement date, i.e. an AL 2050 fund versus the C fund. The difference is a 2050 fund would be comprised of a little bit of the G, a little bit of the F, more of the C, more of the S, and more of the I. Versus if you were solely in the C fund, you would just be invested in the S&P 500. By the AL 2050 funds reduce your potential income or your return because you have more diversification. So diversification is not always the best. Sometimes people say diversification is de-worstification. You can be overly diversified so as to be de-worstified, if that were a word. But diversification is important. And if you want to be safer than just being in the C fund, then you have the AL funds as options. So those are the life cycle funds. They're also known as target retirement day funds in other 401k instances. So you have the AL income, which is the safest of the life cycle funds, and then you have the 2065. So you'll see what I was trying to say earlier is you can see here the AL income, it's less risky. The 2030 is medium risk, and then if you decide to put the 2065 in here, it's the highest risk. The reason is because AL 2065 assumes that if you're in that fund, you'll be withdrawing your money in 2062 or later. And it tells you that all on the website. The website over the year has gotten better, and I highly recommend that you, on your own, go on to TSP and read what's on there because it's very, very good. As far as fund performance, to give you an idea, let's get rid of let's just do a C fund, and let's do the AL 2065. Or let's do the AL 2050. This 2065 is too new to show any results, but you can see that the 2050 relative to the C fund just had a little bit less return than the C fund. Let's go ahead and put the 2040. 2040 almost is in line with the C fund, but the C fund, for instance, in 2013 had an annual return of 32.45 versus 23.23. So because of the Um, Al fund being comprised of the G, C, S, I, and F. Particularly the the G fund and the F fund within the 2040 life cycle fund brings down the return of the 2040. The C fund, because it's only comprised of the S&P 500, the C fund is the C fund. They don't have any government treasuries or securities to bring down the return. So that's the only difference. Um, if I were to go back in time, like I said, I would be probably just in the C 100% or the S. And I would be willing to even do the C or the S for the duration of my time with the government, 30 plus years. During that time, what I would probably do is um, rebalance my account so as to take some of the proceeds I've accumulated over the years and not have them um, susceptible or open to losses, because as we all know, the stock market is cyclical. It goes up and down. Um, if you lose 50% of your earnings, so if you have 100,000 and you lose 50% due to a market crash, you basically have to earn twice as much as you had so as to break even. If you want more on that, just Google what I just said and you'll understand. But just for giggles, we'll do the C and the S together. You can see that the S did a little bit better over the C, and the main reason for that is the S fund, although it has over 2,000 companies compared to the C fund having 500. The S fund has more um, of a chance to have higher returns because the companies that comprise the S fund are what are considered small capitalization. They're smaller companies with the potential to have greater returns because of how small they are. So it's like an up and coming Tesla. Tesla is not an S&P 500 company, um, and it's considered bigger than a small cap right now. But um, as long as it's considered small cap, it has more of a chance to have a higher return because it's an up and coming. It was an up and coming company. Right now, it should be in the S&P 500, and someday it will be, I'm sure. And it may already be part of the indices in other retirement programs. So if you're part of um, if you work for Walmart, if you work for um, Lowe's, if you work for any company, they're going to have a 401k equivalent of the TSP, which I'm invested in. But the biggest difference is that each company will have their own versions of a C fund, an S fund. Their C fund or their S fund, based on whoever manages the fund. In our case, BlackRock manages the TSP. But let's just say Walmart, um, let's say that instead of BlackRock managing their fund, Vanguard manages their fund. Well, Vanguard will have the equivalent of an S&P 500, and they may include some companies that the C fund doesn't. Or really, it's not really the inclusion; it's actually the weight. Um, so I'm kind of going off the topic, but to get back on topic, the title of this video is what should I invest in? What fund should I invest in? Me personally, this is not investment advice. I would just be in the S or the C fund, due to the fact that those funds will not be, their return will not be diluted by the G um, or F fund. They're solely one fund. But understand that even though you're invested in only the C fund, that you have 500 companies effectively in that fund. So you are diversified. The S fund, you will be um, invested in over 2,000 companies. And if you're in the AL fund, because the AL fund has some C, some F, some G, some I, and some S, you're going to be well diversified. You're going to have the S&P 500, so you're going to have 500 companies, 2,600 companies. You're going to have the securities, you're going to have the bonds, and you're going to have the international companies. Because you have, the way to look at it is the more numbers you have in a solution, and then if you're doing the average of that solution, the average is going to go up, or sorry, down or up based off of how much you have weighted in that index. It's kind of hard to explain, and I hope I got the gist. Anyways, that's the quick and dirty. If you have any questions, please respond back to my or comment on my YouTube video. Um, please be constructively critical of the content. I want to provide good, informative content. If I ramble too much, tell me. I know that's an issue I have. Um, and if you want something specifically spoke about or talked about, let me know and I'll go over it. And thanks for your time and listenership. Appreciate it. Check out my website, www.tspme.com. Everything that I've ever wanted to share with people is on there. My ultimate goal is just to help people um, and reach as many people as I can to help. An update on my account. I think last time I had a little less than 140,000 in my account. I'll have to look at the videos right now. I have 142, including my loan, which is about 20,000. I will have about 160,000 in my account. So, anyways, I don't recommend that you go into your account and constantly check your balance. For me, I just do it as part of my videos. The reason why I share this stuff with you guys is not to be boastful. Um, it's just to share what we normally don't like sharing because it's taboo to talk about what we have. Versus, in my mind, the more you talk about it, the more, in my mind, you're an open book for others to see how you're doing relative to them so that they have a good barometer or benchmark as to where they should be. I know that I have more in my retirement account than even 59-year-olds. But let's just say there's another 35-year-old out there like me that wants to see how much they should have, or not necessarily how much they should have, but where they should be relative to my benchmark, if they were to use me as a benchmark. Um, they now can say, well, this gentleman has been with the agency or the federal government for 15 years. He has 142,000. I have 120,000. I'm not too far off, or I have more than him. I have 160,000. Um, I hope to just be a good barometer or temperature index for government employees like myself, or even employees that have 401ks and other companies. My website is to serve not just through savings plan contributors, but also to help people just understand what their 401k is, and to be able to plan for retirement accordingly. So thanks for your time, and please, I hope you enjoy my video.